Was he ever afraid?
Washington, there is no evidence in the record that he feared death. There's no evidence that he feared being injured in battle. What he was afraid of was that he was not up to the task, that he didn't have what America needed to provide the leadership that they were calling on him to provide. He
didn't at first, did he? When we first, I mean, the most surprising thing that I learned about George Washington, we think of him as a great general. He stunk on ice at the beginning for like a year or so. I mean, we lost New York, we lost everything. They were chasing him all around.
He grew into it.
Do you think that somebody like George Washington could be in office today? Neither of you?
Well, you know, you said before we started that people are beginning to wake up. I think that Americans are looking for somebody like George Washington. Here is a man who was unanimously elected as the commander-in-chief of the new American Army, unanimously elected as the presiding officer of the Constitutional Convention, unanimously elected by the Electoral College twice as the President of the United States, didn't want to do any of it. What kind of person is that? But there was something in him. The subtitle on the biography is "The Man Who United America." When we started, we were not united. And it's true, Samuel Adams earned the title, the father of the American Revolution. Jefferson even called him the patriarch of liberty. But there was only one man who could have been called the father of our country, and that's George Washington.
Is there any president that in your studies, is there any president that has even come close to the role he played? Right guy, right time. And
I can't point to one.
So we've covered faith and we've covered hope. Next, charity and why Ben Franklin's face. And still to come, life after Founders Fridays.
Hi, I'm Dennis from Long Island. Founders Fridays inspired me to go back and start reading a lot of the books that they've highlighted on the show.
My name is Dustin. I'm from Waterloo, Iowa. And Glenn, I'd like to thank you for doing your Founding Fathers Fridays.
We love Founders Fridays, Glenn. Thanks for helping us learn about our country.
Benjamin Franklin was our first foreign ambassador. He was our first spy. He was a scientist that changed the world. He was a geographer, a postmaster, and to me, he is charity. Well, you think about with Benjamin Franklin, the kite, and he's on the money. But there's a lot missing in what's taught about our founders like Franklin. Did you know that Ben Franklin, who hated the poor so much, he created the nation's first hospital? Pennsylvania Assembly didn't want to do it. The idea was about to die, and Franklin said, okay, wait a minute, we got to have a hospital. He issued a challenge. He said, how about if I raise half the money? If I can raise 2,000 pounds from private citizens, this was an impossible feat at the time, you have to raise the other, and you match the funds. The Assembly thinking that they just hit the lottery because this guy's never going to be able to do it. Nobody is going to say, oh yeah, let me give money to build a hospital, you know, because people are hate mongers. They took him up on that, and he did it. That hospital is still operating today. Franklin proved that a private citizen could indeed effect change. Besides the hospital, he also started the first library, the lending library. That was his idea. After a massive fire ravaged the city of Philadelphia in 1730, he helped establish the first volunteer fire company in America. When the government refused to act against the threat from the French and Indian Wars, he printed The Plain Truth and went door to door organizing the first militia in America. In short order, he had 10,000 members in his militia. He's a hate monger. Live free or die.
Live free or die. Well, join
or die.
Join or die.
Yeah.
This is probably where you start with Franklin. It's one of two major Franklin contributions to who we are. The year 1754, the French are stepping up their operations to drive us into the sea. Indian raids on the frontier, French troops coming up the Ohio, coming across the Great Lakes. And the militia system just isn't working. And Franklin, who is now publishing the most important newspaper, the author of the Poor Richard's Almanacs, the postmaster for the colonies, starts circulating the idea of an American militia. All the colonies chipping in according to their population, an army of its own, of our own, which would work with the British, work under British command, and undertake aggressive operations to push the French back down the Ohio. He created essays in his newspapers. He mailed hundreds of letters all over the colonies. He started debates. He started arguments. And then in June, there was going to be a meeting in Albany, New York, to re-bribe the Indian allies of our side and make sure that fix was in, and then to have a conference of all the military leaders of the colonies. And the month before, Franklin, scholars believe, did the drawing and did the engraving, the printing block, and it appeared in his Pennsylvania Gazette. And you can't see it from here, but oh, you can see it there. Every piece of the serpent is listed as one of the colonies. And it's based on a French myth, but the one every American child knew. If you're going to chop a snake up, you have to bury the parts separately because snakes can get back together and live. Now, it's a myth, but this picture immediately, even people who couldn't read, knew what the message was.
Next, he was the most widely recognized figure in colonial America. So why is he barely recognized in the history books today?
I'm Mary Nail from Cocoa Beach, Florida. I've studied civics and government all my life. I've been interested in it since I was 10. I never knew this information. It was shocking to me and so comforting to know that I finally know the truth.
Now to a founding father completely erased from our history books. There probably wouldn't even be a revolution if it wasn't for this one man. His name, George Whitefield.
One of the things you have to start with Whitefield is that he was the best known person in colonial America, period.
How is that possible? That's like all of a sudden, I was going to say, actually, I could see this happening. That's like in 200 years, people saying, Michael Jackson, who? What? I mean, he was that big of a rock star, right?
Yes, he was.
I mean, it's the equivalent of someone saying that, you know, they've never heard of Billy Graham or something like that,
right,
for us not to know about Whitefield. He was the primary instigator of the Great Awakening of the 18th century. He spoke to and was seen by far the most people in colonial America.
I just want to set the scene a little bit. When he's young, he's over in England, and he's famous over in England first. He converts, he becomes a Methodist, but then he has kind of a really strange relationship, or strained relationship with most of the preachers. That comes from the preachers really being, Church of England. It was like, it was like having Barack Obama give your sermon all the time, I'd imagine, where it's the government, it's the government spin through the eyes of God. And they didn't really care about the poor because the poor didn't vote, right? Mm-hmm. And he was the first guy that says, wait a minute, guys, there are people out there cold and hungry. And that caused some real strain in England. Tell me about when he comes over here to America, what is his message that begins to light the fire for the American Revolution?
As the 1760s went on, he did become very overtly involved with the crisis between Britain and the colonies. In fact, he may have been one of the earliest people from Britain to start warning the colonists that there was trouble coming. There's reports that in 1764 he came to America and said, "There's trouble coming from Britain, and your golden days are at an end," is the quote of what he said, and began warning people ahead of time that this was coming.
He called it, there is a deep laid plot against your civil and religious liberties.
And then when he
Hang on just a second.
yeah.
There is what was it again?
A deep laid plot.
There's a deep laid plot.
Against both your civil and religious liberties. Your golden days are at an end.
What he said.
My heart bleeds for you, America.
That's right. And so when he goes back to England, he's there with Franklin, again, his good friend Franklin, When Franklin testifies before Parliament on the colony's behalf because of their protests against the Stamp Act, and Whitefield, I think, behind the scenes, is advocating against the Stamp Act. And by the time you get to Whitefield's passing in 1770, and on his last trip to America, he dies in Massachusetts, the funeral sermons by the colonial pastors are saying he is largely to thank for the repeal of the Stamp Act. And they say he was a true patriot, not just in words, but also in actions.
The Founders Friday series may have come to an end, but now it's your turn to help keep history alive. We'll tell you how next.
Now that Founders Friday is over, there's still a lot of ways to get good history. When you pick up a biography about George Washington or George Whitefield or Benjamin Rush or John Jay or any founding father, always go to the back and see what the bibliography looks like. And if it cites a bunch of modern books, don't buy it. Get a book that cites the old books, the books that have their writings in it. Our website at wallbuilders.com, we actually have a list of recommended reading items on Founding Fathers, so people can go buy them at the store or then go online and read these books. One of the really fun things to do to help history come alive is not only read biographies, but go see it as it's lived out. So you go to Williamsburg, Virginia, and there at Williamsburg you get to see what colonial life was like, what it was for Patrick Henry and Jefferson and Washington. Or you jump over to, for example, Jamestown, and in Jamestown you see what the early landing was like in the early 1600s. Or you go up to Plymouth Plantation, see what it would have been like to live as a pilgrim in Massachusetts. So there's no reason for Founders Fridays to stop in a personal manner. We just keep feeding ourselves our history and our information that by and large we didn't get while we were in school.
Like you just heard my good friend David Barton say, seek out the original documents of our founders. Read their own words. Read them to your children. Walk in their footsteps. Thank you to David Barton of Wall Builders, and thank you, our viewers, for embracing Founders Fridays. We ask that you would respect Memorial Day weekend. Have a good one. Enjoy it with your family. But remember what it's all about. The men and women in our armed forces. Godspeed. From New York, good night, America.